Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the 22nd Annual Leadership Summit. I want to thank you all for participating yesterday, and for those that didn't participate yesterday, it was a great day of discussion and panelists. We heard first in the morning about the vision coming out of the pandemic that we all are facing today. We then heard and reestablished the 10-year strategic plan and the priorities embedded in that. Then we heard about the accountability and the effectiveness of the strategies we've been employing through the measures of growth. We then listened to the necessity and the challenges in the state budget, the opportunities in the state budget, the bonding potential, and finally the supplemental budget discussion. We then had a chance to hear from a phenomenal and valuable asset, the Alfond Foundation. The monies that were allocated to some of our leading state institutions is phenomenal. And we heard from the leaders of both of our public university and the community college system about how they're going to leverage those funds and turn them around to provide value for us as employers. It was a great day, good conversation, great questions, and I will encourage you all today, as we listen to the panelists and listen to our governor, please use the chat box. I encourage you to ask questions and engage, because that's what this is really all about. Day 2 is typically a day where we have roundtable breakout sessions, and we can't necessarily do that today, so we're asking you to ask the questions. We're going to hear a little bit more about today's agenda from Dana, but before we do, I'd invite Ann Robinson, partner at Pierce Atwood, to share a message from today's premier sponsor.
Good morning. My name is Ann Robinson. On behalf of my colleagues, Andrea Maker and Newell Auger, who are also here today, it is my pleasure to offer Pierce Atwood's greetings to all of you. As a law firm with roots in Maine that date back more than 100 years, we have helped clients navigate all manner of legal challenges and policy initiatives, as well as help them pursue a wide variety of goals and opportunities, all over the course of an ever-changing landscape, both economic and otherwise. Certainly, the COVID pandemic presents an unprecedented, unique set of challenges that confront Maine people and Maine businesses. So while it's regrettable that we cannot gather together in person for this annual event, the importance of our doing so, albeit virtually, could not be greater than it is this year. We want to thank the governor and members of her administration and the members of legislative leadership, committee chairs, and leads who have taken time to engage in this important dialogue with us today. And we also want to thank the members of the Chamber Board for devoting time away from their businesses to participate in today's event. We hope you find today's program informative and productive, and we look forward to working together with all of you in an effort to find ways to help sustain and grow Maine's economy and to preserve and enhance the quality of life in Maine that we all value and cherish. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Connors. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Chamber to welcome you as well, as Cliff has done. I also want to thank Ann Robinson and Pierce Atwood for their continuous support. They have been champions of Leadership Summit over the years, and we are grateful for that. Cliff was absolutely right. We had a wonderful day yesterday. We had some incredible panels that set the stage exceedingly well. We should be very encouraged by what we heard and very hopeful for the future. Today, we have a wonderful day to finish up our second day. We're going to lead in just a moment with our governor, and our governor went out of the way to be sure that she could be with us this morning to address us and to answer some questions. Beyond that, we have all 4 leaders of our legislature, our president, our speaker, and our 2 ranking Republicans in the Senate and the House. That will be followed by 4 leading members of the business community that have listened to this program, who understand many of the issues before them in terms of where we have set the stage moving forward, our strategic plan. How does what they've heard yesterday and today, How do the issues that they are aware of in the legislature impact their business? Does it help them grow or does it stand in the way? All of that and more. It's going to be an exciting day, and what a great way to start, but with our governor, Janet Mills. Cliff, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dana. And as Dana said, our first speaker today is Governor Janet Mills. Janet Mills was sworn in as the 75th governor of Maine on Wednesday, January 2nd, 2019, earning her the distinction of Maine's first woman governor. From her early days in office, Governor Mills has made the time to join us on many occasions for our Traditional Leaders Summit today, at Sunday River, for board meetings, for webinars, broadcasts, and many other requests for her time. I want to take a moment just to reinforce for our attendees how rare this is to have access to the leadership compared to other states across the country. It is another example of how special Maine is. Governor, we really appreciate you being here today. We thank you for joining us. And while it's not always easy, I want you to know that Maine State Chamber appreciates your willingness to listen, collaborate, and find equitable solutions whenever possible. We thank you sincerely for your hard work in these defining times. So Governor, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. The metaphorical floor, at least. The virtual floor, I thank you for the introduction, Cliff. And Dana, good to see you both. We've been through an awful lot this last year. 13 months since the last time we had a leadership seminar. But our whole country's been through an awful lot. Our state has been through an awful lot. While a deadly terror invaded our country, indeed invaded the globe, and our schools closed, graduations were celebrated in open parking lots and drive-in theaters, weddings were postponed, funerals, parades canceled. A mill in Jay saw that their digesters blow up with a devastating photo or video. Loggers have been idled in a paperless economy. Lunchrooms, popular restaurants closed, hotels and stores operating at unheralded losses. Everything from souvenir shops, water slides, bumper cars, agricultural fairs, auto races, church services, baseball games, football contests. Everything we knew, everything that was so familiar has changed. Many of them canceled, all of them modified, restricted. Primary elections put off, town meetings morphed into garage caucuses and Zoom meetings, a general election that challenged our ability to adapt and, quote, pivot, and yet which brought out the largest turnout in Maine history, with more than 60% of people voting absentee or in advance. And on the national level, a presidential election that sometimes seemed to test our sanity. Holiday parties were truncated. We warned people not to have Christmas parties and the like. And of course, our economy, but I'll get to that. But we're pushing through. We will get through to the other side of this. I am confident as anything. It's odd when you were talking earlier, you used the words pandemic and vision in the same sentence. I never thought I would hear those two words in the same phrase. But this is a whole new lingo, whole new culture in a way. We've learned words like pivot, bubble, flatten the curve, things we never thought we'd learned before. We're getting used to it. We will not only survive this as a state, as a culture, as communities, as a country, but we will rise a greater, better state for all that we've been through, for all that we've endured, all that we've learned. We are a country and a state that knows compassion and pivoting, a state that acts with courage, that values community. That's us. And you all are a vital part of that community. I want to take a moment to mention Heather Johnson, whom you heard from yesterday, one of the most valued members of my cabinet. I just am so impressed every day when we brainstorm about the most strange, challenging, difficult issues that none of us ever thought we would confront before, that I get to talk with wonderful, bright people like Nirav Shah, Jean Lambrou, Laura Fortman, and Heather Johnson. Heather, who, like many of my cabinet members, had a private life before, had a life in the private sector. She held high executive positions at Verizon, Polaroid, Gateway, and we were fortunate that she came back to Maine and eventually assumed the position that she has now in our cabinet. I like to think that I've got the best cabinet of any state in the country. I think that every day. I conclude that every day after every session that we brainstorm over these interesting issues. And I know that you've had her ear every day, as many other sectors of our economy have had her ear. And she is a faithful communicator of those views, those opinions and observations. What handicaps me as much as anything during the pandemic is not being able to get out and walk Main Street, not being able to talk to shopkeepers, businesses, and people on the street, because I so enjoy that. This is the best we can do, a virtual presentation. I'll try to do the best I can, but I enjoy hearing from every one of you, and I hope we have time for some questions. Well, 13 months ago, the headline of the Bangor Daily News was, quote, "Maine economists foresee 2020 as a year of growth." When that story was published, Maine, like the rest of the United States, was experiencing a record-long period of economic stability, unemployment at all-time lows, the number of jobs and average wages was increasing. Our big challenge was getting people to come to Maine to work here and supplying the workforce we desperately needed. Michael Hillard, an economics professor at the University of Southern Maine, said in the Bangor Daily, quote, "The question is when it will come to an end. It could be a scenario where the coyote chases the roadrunner off a cliff," end quote. To address the challenges and drive collaboration among industries and to jumpstart economic growth, Commissioner Heather Johnson worked with more than 1,300 people, including many of you, people from all sectors and all regions of the state, to draft the state's 10-year economic development plan, the first of its kind in decades. And I know you heard a lot about that yesterday. The three distinct measurable goals of the plan were growing the average wage by 10%, increasing the value of products sold by 10%, and attracting 75,000 people to Maine's talent pool over 10 years. That plan was the foundation of our future, but we didn't know at that time how truly critical it would be. We were about to be pushed off a cliff, not by a coyote, as it turns out, but by a dangerous virus. At the outset of the pandemic, when protecting public health required certain restrictions on our economy, when businesses of all sizes grappled with heavy losses and millions of people across the country found themselves newly unemployed, I sought advice from the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, Eric Rosengren. With the global economy reeling, our border with Canada closed, still is, cruise ships still docked, people wary of travel or dining out, and the tourist season so crippled. With the virus spreading unchecked in states on our doorstep, I asked President Rosengren, how can we stabilize Maine's economy? I've got to look forward to the end of this and make sure we rebound. He said bluntly, we had to get the virus under control if we're to have any hope of long-term economic recovery. He said, quote, "You can't have a healthy economy without healthy people." That advice has been one that shaped our pandemic response, a response that I suggest is working. We've proposed balanced supplemental budgets now and are working towards a biennial budget. And those budgets do not cut vital services and do not create new programs. We are working with the legislature every day now to respond to the pandemic in meaningful ways. And we're working on a reasonable solution to the issue of tax conformity when it comes to critical paycheck protection funds, PPP funds that have helped businesses across Maine keep people on the payroll, pay the light bill, and keep the doors open. And I know it's of interest to you. I want to also take a moment to talk about the private-public relationships that have developed and been so helpful during this pandemic. I want to thank companies like LL Bean, Abbott Labs, American Roots, Flufold, Flufo, Main Source Machining in West Newfield. Remember when we were preparing for the election and there were lawsuits and folks were asking us to do this and do that and change the election laws entirely. And we said, no, I don't think we need to do that. We need to be targeted and surgical about this. We called this Maine community colleges and we said, can you design for us a drop box of some sort of like a mailbox, but a drop box for ballots that would be secure, fastened to a building or some other structural structure. And they did so. In a heartbeat, they designed these drop boxes. And then we set out a quickie RFP and got a response from Main Source Machining in West Newfield, a company that makes barbecues. And they turned to and they made drop boxes that we were able to transport all over the state for secure balloting, voting, and that worked. Sazerac, Maine Distillery, New England Distillery, Maine Beer Company, all these companies that turned to and made hand sanitizer. The University of Maine that developed a wastewater testing mechanism. New Balance and LL Bean, of course, that turned to and made face masks, just as American Roots did, Flufold, and Adam Lee, who took it upon himself to produce PSAs about mask wearing and public health precautions. Great ads. Puritan and the Department of Labor and the community colleges teamed up with Puritan and Abbott and other companies to make sure they had workforce available to do what they had to do to help us through the pandemic, help our nation through the pandemic, and particularly IDEX Labs. The most moving evening of my life during the pandemic was when we got word finally that IDEX received the emergency use authorization from the FDA, something we had been lobbying for, something I personally talked to the FDA about. And the night we got that, the assistant to the individual at the FDA was actually from Maine, a lovely young woman. And when she called to tell me the news, I said, you don't know how many lives you've saved. In Maine and elsewhere, you've saved thousands of lives just now. Anyway, we're working on problems every day. We're solving problems, and we're getting there. Our economy is slowly recovering, but the pandemic obviously rages on. And in December 2020, there was 7.6% fewer jobs than in February of last year. More than 33,200 people were unemployed, a rate of 4.9%, and others have just stopped looking for work. It's hard for us to tell when people stop collecting unemployment or filing for unemployment, whether they're doing so because they're sick or because they got a job or because they stopped looking for some other reason. We know that health concerns and childcare challenges, isolation and quarantines, other factors, including a lack of high-speed internet, continue to be barriers to jobless people in Maine who want to return to work. Maine is distributing all of the COVID-19 vaccine we can as fast as we can and efficiently and equitably as we can to get this virus under control and get our state back to normal, which sometimes means something a little different, but allows our small businesses especially to survive this crisis and speed up our economic recovery. We focus on vaccinating medical and emergency response personnel first to ensure that our hospital emergency response and people COVID response can stay strong. This is sort of like when you get on the airplane, they tell you, put your own mask on first in an emergency so you can help others. We're putting the mask on first on the healthcare frontline workers and frontline emergency responders. And now we're getting to vaccinate those who are most likely to get seriously ill and die from COVID-19, people who are 70 and older. And in a few weeks, hopefully we will start vaccinating people of a younger age, 65 and older. It's my hope that soon we'll have an increased supply of vaccine that will allow us to vaccinate more people more quickly. And just this week, in conversations with the Biden administration, they told us that we're going to be seeing a 5% increase for the next 3 weeks, over and above the 16% increase they announced last week. So we're getting there. They're making production of the vaccines their highest priority. And in partnership with Maine Health this week, we opened a large-scale vaccination site in Scarborough, at the old Scarborough Downs. And Northern Light also opened one at the Bangor Cross Center, and there are more to come. So even during the nor'easter on Tuesday, about 700 people showed up in Bangor to be vaccinated. Getting vaccinated is critical to getting our people back to work and our economy back to normal. While those efforts continue in earnest, we also have to turn our eyes to the future. You know that in May of last year, we created the Economic Recovery Committee to build a bridge from the pandemic to posterity. Even while we're fighting the pandemic, I wanted to make sure we had our eyes on the future. Those 37 business leaders and economic experts, as well as state legislators from both parties, representatives of Maine's congressional delegation, they all offered 8 major recommendations to grow Maine's economy. Those recommendations, which I believe you discussed yesterday also with Heather Johnson and others, include investing in innovation, supporting entrepreneurs while sustaining our small businesses, creating pathways for people of all experiences to fill jobs in high demand fields, establishing Maine as a premier destination for talented professionals, investing in early education and housing supports, and addressing structural inequities to make Maine a place where every person can reach his or her full potential. Those recommendations also include ensuring that every Maine person has high quality internet access, a big challenge. According to Pew Research, 9 of every 10 individuals, adults in the United States uses the internet, not surprisingly. During the pandemic, our ability to connect conveniently to other places and to other people has never been more important. From students learning remotely to seniors accessing telehealth to businesses selling products and services online. And I want to take a moment to thank some of the philanthropists and Bangor Savings for helping us purchase hotspots and internet access service contracts and devices for thousands of young students in areas where there was not sufficient access to allow them to stay connected to their schools during this pandemic. Major barriers to internet access include physical infrastructure, especially in the rural communities, digital literacy that is necessary for people to understand and utilize emerging technologies. I believe the chambers of commerce all across the state can help businesses large and small right now understand how to better connect and how to better use their the internet connections they have to reach Maine people during the pandemic. And affordability. National data shows that a family with an income of less than $50,000 a year simply cannot afford a connection of more than $10 to $20 a month. Well, that's virtually non-existent. Since most internet subscriptions in Maine are about $60 a month or more, that leaves many households dependent on free Wi-Fi with hotspots at schools, libraries, and places of business. Connect Me is addressing these challenges by using the funding they have from the state, from the private sector, the federal government, and community partners to fund already identified broadband expansion projects all over Maine and Maine communities. To do more accurate mapping, and I'm sure Heather talked to you about this yesterday, mapping of internet access in Maine in collaboration with existing service providers. So we keep hearing from legislators and others, look, I don't have enough adequate internet access in my community, in so-and-so's neighborhood, or this street or that street, but we don't have accurate mapping of the state to actually show where there is any reasonable access to the internet and where there is not. I hope the state chamber will work with us during the legislative session to champion a state investment in high-speed access. For example, we're looking forward to putting forward a back-to-work economic recovery bond package that would include focusing on high-speed access, high-speed internet access, and access to affordable childcare, which the Economic Recovery Committee called for, especially in rural areas. We call for rebuilding the food supply chain for Maine's heritage industries and workforce training through Maine's career and technical education centers and the private sector as well. Just gonna look. Getting Maine people back to work must be our sole focus. As we work to overcome this crisis, we can't afford to ignore other crises that also undermine the foundations of our economy or threaten our economy. Excuse me one minute. Um, and I'm talking now about things like climate change. You know, recently, the Maine Climate Council, which was authorized by a bipartisan enactment of the legislature, issued its report. They are an assembly of scientists, industry leaders, bipartisan local and state officials, and ordinary citizens. They created a plan to reduce carbon emissions and achieve carbon neutrality in Maine by 2045. Their plan, entitled Maine Won't Wait, details steps Maine can take to protect people and communities from the effects of climate change while creating new jobs, new good paying jobs, and spurring economic growth. Informed by those findings, my administration will focus on doubling the number of clean energy and efficiency jobs to 30,000 by 2030, and expanding incentives for purchasing electric vehicles, building more electric vehicle charging stations across Maine, doubling the pace of home weatherization, which is a challenge in Maine, increasing the number of heat pumps in homes and businesses, and creating energy efficiency incentives for private businesses. These efforts will create, I believe, a thriving new economic sector or sectors with clean energy jobs that also contribute toward a clean environment. They'll save money for Maine people, towns, schools, and businesses, and attract the young workforce we so badly need in every region of our state. I know that energy costs are a major barrier for businesses across the state of Maine. We want to address that. Implementing the recommendations of the Economic Recovery Committee and the state's 10-year strategic economic development plan and the recommendations of the Maine Climate Council, most importantly, putting this pandemic behind us once and for all, will allow our state to survive in the near term, strengthen our economy in the long term, and better prepare our families, our businesses, and our communities for any possible other crisis to come, whatever and whenever that might be. From the beginning, Maine's business community has been at the heart of developing these recommendations to grow our economy. Now I invite you to continue working with my administration to turn those recommendations into reality. I look forward to joining you all in person at the next annual Leadership Summit. In the meantime, in my administration, please know and remember that you have an open door, albeit virtual door, an open mind, and an open heart. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to answering a few questions.
Great. Well, Governor, thank you so much for your time this morning. Also, thank you for those words that really establish your priorities and vision for this state. I want you to know that from myself and from the State Chamber and from all that are in attendance, we thank you for your leadership, starting with a strategic plan, navigating this challenge that we all face in the pandemic. And we also want to thank you and help you to understand that today, as we have in the past, we stand ready. We have a collection of business leaders, educational leaders, and legislative leaders that are here to work together, to listen, to understand, and to help bring forth recommendations and perspectives for you. So our collaboration means success for the state of Maine. So with that, I think we have about 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. So I would ask, maybe we can hear the first question for the governor.
Thanks, Cliff. And I just want to remind folks out there that if you have a question for the governor, please type it in the chat and we'll ask it. First question is surrounding the budget. And the question is, with the budget being the defining policy document of any legislative session, Governor Mills, can you speak to your budget and maybe some of the policy priorities contained within it?
Yesterday, and we are presenting the budget this week. Well, the supplemental budget we're presenting right now, and the biannual budget will be presented starting February 16th. I think the principles involved in both of those budgets, first of all, the constitutional requirement of a balanced budget. We are not changing tax rates. We are not cutting vital services. We are maintaining, I believe, stability and continuity in services and in revenues and in our priorities. I think a couple of things are worth noting. That is education. We're incrementally adding to general purpose aid to education as the law requires. We're not at 55% yet, but we were slightly above the level we were at in the last current biennial budget. So we're doing that. We're maintaining revenue sharing in towns and cities, and we are focusing on children's issues as well, adding to the child care workforce, making sure we have the resources to protect every child who might be in circumstances of jeopardy, and focusing on child care. We heard an awful lot during the pandemic, and we focused some of our CRF, the federal funds, on child care. First, child care for essential workers, people who are required to work despite the stay-at-home order of last March, April. We wanted to make sure they had child care. And then child care for people who want to go back to work or able to go back to work, and child care for people whose kids were not going back to school because of circumstances at the local schools because of the pandemic, related to quarantine and the number of COVID cases that were rampant in some areas. So child care was a big focus. Bruce Van Note will tell you about roads. That's a separate budget. But those are the main focuses, are keeping our revenues and expenditures steady and balanced, focusing on education, the public health infrastructure, and childcare and children's issues. The public health infrastructure, of course, took a dive during the last administration, and we started to rebuild it during 2019 and in our last budget. We're still working on that, and it was critical to our response to the pandemic that we had started rebuilding that infrastructure. You remember there were about 60-something public health nurses previously. That had gone down to about 12 in the past administration. We had started to rebuild the number of public health nurses and the infrastructure at the CDC to be able to respond to things like this pandemic. So those are some of the focuses of the budget.
Thank you, Governor Mills. Our next question surrounds the 10-year strategic plan, in which we heard from Commissioner Johnson yesterday, and the facts surrounding the long-term vision for Maine, which is unprecedented in recent memory. Can you speak to what it will take for Maine to achieve the goals contained within the 10-year strategic plan?
Oh boy, well, increasing the wage, increasing the value added of our products, attracting 75,000 more people to our workforce. What will it take? It'll take good messaging. It'll take a unified effort with the private and public sectors. It will take the kinds of partnerships we saw during the pandemic. People continuing to come together and say, this is really what we need. We do need to elevate wages. We do need to elevate, complement our workforce. We do need value added. For instance, the value added area, we've been looking at our food, agriculture and aquaculture, agriculture and aquaculture needs that were highlighted during the pandemic. You know, when restaurants closed, when cruise ships stopped docking here, when Canadians were not allowed to come into Maine, as they're still not. We saw devastating impacts on our food and fish communities, sectors. We want to make sure we have more processing ability within the state. We want to make sure we maximize our agricultural resources and make them more sustainable. Those are some of the things that will add value to our fisheries, to our blueberries, to our maple syrup, to our craft breweries, all these industries, and make sure that we're not totally dependent on outside sources, outside influences. Attracting people to Maine, attracting people here, welcoming people to Maine to join our workforce, complement our workforce. This is something that we've been talking about since the first day of my administration. Welcoming people here, attracting a young workforce, which also ties into the Climate Council's report. Because I think just in the renewable energy sectors. We've seen a lot of people come to Maine who want to work in those sectors because they're excited about addressing climate change. They're excited about new technologies, being part of the evolving renewables, that area. And obviously, we're seeing people move to Maine since last summer in particular and last year. People who came here, who had seasonal places here, came here early and stayed longer. Some of them are still staying. People are working remotely, so we want to make sure we maximize that technology, maximize the effort to attract people to come here and work remotely, earn their money here, shop here, educate their children here. That's happening, and we saw the housing markets. Sales reached record highs in 2020 as people moved to Maine. In December alone, housing sales rose 31.5%, and the median sales price jumped by more than 15%. One in three homes that were sold went to out-of-state buyers, up from 1 in 4. So these things are happening, and not expectedly necessarily, but we can use these phenomena to address our workforce needs, address the value-added issues, and address the elevation of our wages, which is also important.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Another question for the Governor.
Yes, Governor Mills, the next question that's been submitted has to do with bonding. And the question speaks to the fact that some have heard that bonding may be dealt with earlier in the legislative session than we normally do, which it's normally done with at the session. Can you speak to the timing of a bond package during this legislative session that you may see?
Sure. What I've seen before, and I served on the Appropriations Committee for 4 years, as you know, what we've seen before is that bonds were put off on the calendar or put off by the administration until the last minute sometimes, and sort of as an afterthought after the budget was dealt with. I think that the budget, the biennial budget, and any bond package should be dealt with concurrently, that we should put everything out there that we think ought to be considered by the legislature. Things get jammed up towards the end of the session. Things get caught up with unrelated issues. I don't want to see that happen. I want legislators, policymakers, and the public to know what it is we're up to, what it is we think would be good for the economy, how we can take advantage of historically low interest rates. Want that discussion to start earlier rather than later. It's a healthier thing to do, a healthier way to discuss and debate and analyze the issues rather than putting things off to the last minute. So yes, you're right. We want to deal with bonds earlier than later. And people have to anticipate when you're talking about putting bids on projects. You want to know in advance what the likelihood is of having money in the pipeline next year at this time, or next fall, or for advanced planning purposes.
Well, Governor, as you might imagine, our time is running short. However,
oh no, I don't want to ding Bruce Van Note's time, because that would be awful.
Yeah, your
You
time
can
is
talk
very
about
valuable.
bonds a lot better than I can.
Your time is extremely valuable and really appreciated. Again, your leadership from the beginning has been appreciated. Your openness to hearing our voice is very much appreciated. And on behalf of the Chamber and all that are in attendance today, we want to thank you for your time and for your openness, and know that you have a group of collaborators here that are hoping to continue our dialogue, moving the state forward. That's all of our priorities. So with that, I think we'll hear from another sponsor of today's event. So thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor.
Kennebec Savings Bank is proud to be a sponsor of Maine State Chamber's Legislative Summit. The Maine State Chamber plays a critical role in supporting Maine business community. It's events like this Legislative Summit that provide a valuable opportunity for leaders to come together for open, honest dialogue about policy issues that affect our state. As a community bank, we share Maine State Chamber's mission in ensuring the health and vitality of our local economies. On behalf of all of us here at Kennebec Savings Bank, thank you for being here. By working together, we can all help ensure the economic growth and prosperity of our state for decades to come.
Well, welcome back, everyone. And before I introduce our next guest, I do want to add to the words of our chair, Cliff Grime. The spirit of yesterday, and I'm sure it'll be the same today, you set that standard, is that we're in this together. And nobody speaks to that better or more than you do, Governor. And we at the Chamber are very pleased and able to work with your administration, and we're very, very grateful for that. And speaking of working with your departments, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Bruce Van Note. Bruce Van Note came to the Department of Transportation in 1994. Bruce brings with him a remarkable degrees in surveying, he is an attorney, and he's also an engineer. He also is a tremendously committed and very, very able Commissioner of Transportation. And we often hear the words, money can't buy you happiness. Well, as a former highway commissioner, it goes a long ways in buying us happiness when you're in his position. I would say this, you will hear Bruce say more than once, and he says it well and he means every word. We're doing the very best we can with what we have. And he's absolutely right about that. He is doing the very best he can with what he has. And what he has is a topic of our discussion with Bruce in the next 15 minutes or so. And that is, they have been impacted by the pandemic, as many of us have. They have been impacted by less travel, by alternative vehicles, and we support that. But it has a price in terms of how much money is available. I don't want to take any more of his time. His time is limited already. But Bruce, thank you for being with us. And we are grateful that you're here to speak to the very issue that means a lot to most Mainers.
Thank you, Dana. I very much appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to Cliff and every one of your chamber members for this opportunity. Coming on after the governor feels a little bit like a struggling stand-up coming up after Jerry Seinfeld on a show, but I'll do my best to follow and talk a little bit about transportation. Money doesn't buy happiness, Dana, but it does buy economic prosperity and quality of life. And I think everybody instinctively knows that. But transportation, has its own budget. It's about roughly a tenth the size of the general fund budget. So it doesn't get the the headlines all the time. That's fine with us, by the way, down at transportation. We're fine just doing the work and doing the best we can. And you can use any analogy you want. Sometimes we talk about furnace in the basement. You don't think about it till it breaks, or hiding on the front of the shelf. You don't think about it, but it's right there. The one I think I'll use today on Super Bowl weekend is DOT's like the offensive line of a football team. You don't really think about them that much. They're big, they're smart. You can't move without them, and they don't dance in the end zone after the score. But they're central to the team, and that's the way we see ourselves, and we like that role, actually. Our mission hasn't changed. It's to support economic prosperity and quality of life by responsibly providing the safest and most reliable transportation system possible, given available resources. Obviously, those last three words are key. In Maine, we have a very large land area, 3.5 times that of New Hampshire. About the same population, but widely dispersed over that area. An expansive multimodal transportation system, and geology and weather that, although beautiful and what makes us special, are challenging from the standpoint of transportation. It requires lots of bridges and lots of miles. Last year, a nonpartisan Blue Ribbon Commission made up of legislators, stakeholders, and other professionals sat down to quantify what the transportation funding shortfall was and how we could solve it. They determined that it was well over $200 million per year. That's per year, not per biennium. And that was after factoring in assumed continued transportation bonding of roughly $100 million a year. The commission couldn't agree on one particular solution, but they identified lots of options, and they issued their final report March 9th, 2020. Within a week, obviously, COVID hit Maine. The economy shook, jobs vanished, traffic plummeted. In March, April, May, we're down roughly 50% for most years. We're still down between 5 and 10% week to week. Like your businesses, the pandemic affected DOT, all state agencies, and DOT is nationwide. Obviously, people driving less means less fuel tax revenue, and state highway funds fell. The current biennium's down almost 30 million, or 4.4% from the previous biennium. That's a historic drop. In response, many states cut back on construction, and some even suspended construction for a time. The governor and Maine DOT took a different tack. Although the health of our people is obviously job one and will remain so, we also knew that our economy is critical too. Working with industry, we quickly concluded that construction was an essential activity and that the nature of most of our work, being outside and spread out, should continue. We also assessed whether there were actually any short-term opportunities for transportation due to the pandemic that could be realized. There were. Lower traffic volumes meant that work could be done more safely and more cost effectively on some projects. The earlier than usual July 2020 referendum bond vote allowed us to add 10 capital projects to our work plan, valued at roughly 33 million, an increase in the ballpark of about 7% of our 2020 program. If you live anywhere near or drove through 295 in Portland, you knew that we had lane closures all spring because we could. Traffic was down. It didn't require night work. It allowed us to get in there and do some work that we couldn't do otherwise. Maine DOT embraced a new term during the pandemic, which we called business unusual. The term recognized that how we are working is very, very unusual, but the need to keep doing our business, delivering for Maine, is just the same. Last month, Maine DOT released our 2021 edition of our work plan. It's Maine DOT's annual way of answering the very legitimate question, what are you doing with the funding we're providing you? It includes all work, capital projects, maintenance and operations activities, planning initiatives, and administrative functions. I'm in there, overhead, I'm in there too. And it totals over 2,000 individual work items, totaling for 3 years, about 2.7 billion. The plan calls for investing at nearly 1.4 billion for highway and bridge capital projects over the 3 years. That is a key investment that fits into the third prong of the economic development strategy, making key investments. It also includes over $358 million in multimodal capital needs for transit, aviation, freight rail, ferries, other marine infrastructure, and for active transportation. Despite the significant challenges by the pandemic, this work plan maintains essential services and solid capital programs based upon continued prudent levels of state bonding and discretionary and extraordinary federal funding. It also seeks to expand partnership programs, support existing and emerging businesses, refocus villages, investment in our villages, which will attract people like we're talking, along with broadband. There's no sense having a good village without broadband, and to start to confront climate change. This plan, like all recent work plans, requires Maine DOT to continue to what we call MacGyver. Our general approach aimed at squeezing every bit of value out of each existing dollar. For example, this work plan calls for increasing the amount of light capital paving from 600 miles a year to 725 miles a year. This plan relies on some one-time federal extraordinary coronavirus funding and continued reliance on federal discretionary grants. Often asked about if, is there going to be a big infrastructure program on the federal level? There's talk of it, and if it materializes, we'll be agile enough to adjust to it. But talk alone is not a plan, and it's not something we can rely on for funding. So that's a stay tuned. This work plan also relies on annual bond support, including an assumption of $150 million in state bonding in 2021, some of which needs to be approved in the first half of this calendar year. This bond is larger than in past years, in accordance with the Economic Recovery Plan Commission report and the need. I understand from listening to remarks yesterday from Senator Breen and Representative Millett that some transportation bonding fatigue is starting to set in on for appropriators. I totally understand that. We need to eventually reduce our reliance on bonding for transportation. And we need to invest in other areas. As the governor mentioned, it drove home the point of the need for broadband. That is just as important a connection as a road. I believe bonding will always be part of the mix, but I look forward to the day when the fiscal foundation upon which our work plans are built relies less on bonding and more on sustainable and reliable revenue. The Blue Ribbon Commission recognized this. It recommended that we need a combination of redirected general fund revenue and new highway fund revenue. Predictably, the more conservative policymakers felt that redirection of general fund revenue was the primary way to go. More progressive members recognized in general fund needs of healthcare, education, revenue sharing, et cetera, believed that new transportation revenue was needed. In my view, both views have merit. The bulk of the commission looked for compromise, a reasoned combination of both. I suspect that when the time comes to rebuild the fiscal foundation of transportation in Maine, the wisdom of the bulk of the Blue Ribbon Commission will prevail. Long-term, Maine people in our economy deserve the safety, economic prosperity, and quality of life that comes with a better funded transportation system. We need to get past just maintaining the existing system, past MacGyver mode, and improve the system in a balanced, modally agnostic way. We need to targeted capacity improvements. We need to improve our villages and downtowns to attract those new Mainers, invest in freight networks, including ports, and increase transit in a pragmatic way statewide. But in my view, this session right now has to be about the pandemic. Our priorities must be on defeating the virus, restoring our economy, helping Maine people and businesses in need, and responsibly addressing budget shortfalls. Governor Mills' budgets and upcoming bond proposals do that. So although we need to eventually reduce our reliance on bonding, the fact is that there has never been a better time and more prudent time to borrow for strategic priorities. The need has never been higher and the interest rates have never been lower. The voters have been very supportive. The last bond passed with about 78% approval. So in closing, I think transportation, although sometimes a furnace in the basement or the offensive line that you only think of when there's a holding penalty, is one of those strategic investments that we need for our economic future, the third prong of the economic development plan. I want to thank the Chamber for its consistent support for transportation over the years, and I look forward to working with all of you and all policymakers to move Maine forward, in part through transportation investments. Dana, thanks very much for your time, and thanks to all your members.
Well, I'm not going to let you go, Commissioner. I still have you on the phone, so I'm going to take advantage while we have you. First of all, I want to let the participants know that it tells you a lot about Bruce's attitude when, in fact, we realized we may have some time because of the governor's busy schedule. So yesterday, a call was made, and Bruce immediately said, absolutely, I'll be there. That is the type of response that is typical of Bruce and certainly puts on display how accessible he is and how interested he is in working with all of us. So thanks, Bruce, for that. And I do appreciate very much you being with us. I want to also, it's my impression that you have not yet presented to your Transportation Committee. But what can you tell on your budget, I should say, and your capital program? I know that in spite of your incredible stewardship and the very supportive bond issues of $100 million a year, that it continues to create a gap. And it's probably, not probably, it has been made worse by the impacts of the pandemic. What can you tell us about your budget this year in terms of what that gap is and other things related to the budget that would be helpful for all of us to know?
I think the budget and the bonds, our funding is a lot of legs to the stool. The budget is one, the highway fund revenues, bonding is a piece, and federal funding is a piece. And depending upon the support for bonding and timing of that and federal funding, I think what's most remarkable is how roughly stable it is. I mean, we're stable compared to past years. We're trying to maintain solid capital programs. Our paving numbers are going to be, our heavy paving on the high priority roads are going to be down. We're adjusting with some additional light capital paving. That's MacGyver mode. That's what you do. And our bridges have a solid program. So it's not so much if you're a contractor or a business person or a traveler who's looking at orange cones, you'll roughly see the same number of orange cones if the bonding and the continued discretionary federal funding comes through. We did have a one-time help from the December coronavirus relief bill that does help. It's significant, but we kind of built that into the plan in the fall. We expected something to come, and it came roughly in the magnitude of what we thought it would. So it's not a bonanza, but it's very welcome. We would have had a hole without it. So it's kind of steady. It's steady as she goes kind of work plan, which in a pandemic I consider a victory.
I would as well. And put into context what that gap would be today if you had all the money you needed to fill what money you have today with the needs that exist out there, because I know you do it. The department does an exceptional job, not only performing with the money they have, but also looking forward with a plan that indicates, here's what our needs are. What is that gap today?
Yeah, the Blue Ribbon Commission, which I would listen to more than me actually, is it was well over 200 million per year, and if you wanted to eliminate bonding, add 100 million to that. That's very significant, obviously, and it's just the nature of our infrastructure and our state. I love Maine exactly the way it is. I love all the rural areas in the stretch, but if you live next door to somebody who had a half-mile long driveway and your driveway was only 200-300 feet long, you'd expect the guy with the half-mile long driveway to pay more, to take care of that than yours. Maine is a state with very long public driveways for people. Number of feet per capita is very high. We got a lot of bridges because of all the rivers and streams we have in our geology. It's beautiful, I love it, but it just means it's a big job. And it's multimodal too. It's not just roads and bridges. We have transit systems in our more urban and suburban areas that have to be modernized. Electric vehicles are coming. Autonomous cars are coming. When I read reports, I hear, we need a modern transportation system. and I agree. But you need roads and bridges for electric and autonomous cars too. In fact, you need better striping, better alignments for those kind of vehicles someday. So I think we're still going to have the kind of meat and potatoes highways and bridge networks that are going to support the transportation vehicles of the future. And then we're going to be investing in electrification on urban transit systems, other modes of transportation. We have a ferry service to take care of. Exciting things happening with the rail network. 2 Class 1 railroads coming into Maine in just the last few years. That's big news about connections, affects our ports. We have investments to make to support wind energy in our ports. It's a very exciting time to be in transportation.
It does hold a lot of promise for our future. The people of Maine have always been supportive of our transportation system, and your leadership during these very difficult times assures that going forward. We certainly will work with you, and you are clearly another example, along with Heather Johnson, Commissioner of DECD, that was with us yesterday, why we place so much confidence in this administration, our ability to work with them, and the promise of the future. You are 2 of about 16 cabinet members, all with tremendous credentials and commitment. And we thank you for that, and we look forward to working with you. We're going to be right back with a very special panel of legislative leaders, but first, a message from one of our sponsors.
All of us at Hannaford want to thank the public servants and fellow business people here today for their work in keeping Maine strong, always, but especially at this time. At Hannaford, we understand that helping keep people fed and healthy is our responsibility. But we also believe that working together, we can be greater than groceries. This past year, our 10,000 Maine associates have been truly heroic, constantly adapting to keep everyone safe and cared for. Every day, each of our stores donates food to local food pantries and Good Shepherd Food Bank, more than 10 million pounds of nutritious food in Maine last year alone. Our always strong partnership with local farmers, harvesters, and food producers has grown even stronger in 2020, and we invested more than $500,000 in additional unplanned pandemic response donations in Maine last year. These donations helped struggling family farmers, restaurant workers, organizations that help hungry children and seniors, homeless individuals, and families trying to make ends meet to find quality aftercare programs for their kids and to navigate distance learning. Hannaford is proud to partner with you and make Maine strong.
Good morning. I'm Peter Gore. I'm the Executive Vice President at the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome you this morning. For more than 20 years now, a key element of this annual Leadership Summit has been the ability to hear from our legislative leadership, and we are privileged today to have all 4 of them with us to share with us their priorities for the 130th Maine Legislature. Moderating today's first panel is the Maine State Chamber of Commerce's board's first vice chair, Luann Ballesteros of Jackson Laboratories. Luann is currently the Vice President of External and Government Affairs at Jackson Labs, where she has held a number of positions since joining the organization in 2005. She is an active participant in advocating for the state's business community, serving as an appointed member of both the Maine Economic Growth Council and the Maine Workforce Investment Board. Luann, take it away. We asked you all here this morning because we want to hear from you and from each of the perspectives of your caucuses on what your priorities are as you go forward into the 130th legislature. And I'm sure all of you are veteran legislators, you've been around a while, so you know firsthand that this session probably presents some challenges for you in terms of process and legislating that I don't think any of us could possibly have imagined as we entered into 2021, although after 2020, anything's possible. So I think what we're going to do to start is hear from each of you from the perspectives of your caucus and what your priorities are. And since right now we have both the senators here, I'm going to start with the Senate. And with that, I'm going to actually start. I'm going to start with the Senate President, Troy Jackson. Troy is a longtime member of the legislature. He served in both the House and the Senate. And he is currently the president of the Maine State Senate, beginning his second session as the president of the Maine State Senate. And joining him and speaking will be Representative Jeff Timberlake. Jeff is the Republican Minority Leader, also served in the House, currently serves in the Senate. Both of you have been legislators for a while. You've seen a lot of different legislative circumstances, but probably nothing like what we've seen right now. So, Senator Jackson, I'm going to ask, Mr. President, I'm going to ask you to start, and then we'll go to Senator Timberlake.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Peter, and I definitely want to thank the Maine State Chamber for inviting me here today. Certainly, it's too bad where we are in the state and in this country with COVID, because I've certainly enjoyed the leadership summits in the past with the chamber, having that discussion. But like I said, I appreciate the opportunity here today. I mean, we've gone through 10 months of really, really tough times as a state and as a nation. I know that the business community has had a really, really hard time with the loss in revenues, loss of economic activity, and workers, have felt that burden obviously too, on a huge scale like we've never seen before. And so, everything that we're hoping to do this session was with the mind trying to make recovery better for business and workers. I mean, people have had our backs for the last 10 months, and trying to do things that are meaningful to help businesses and workers this session is our focus and what we want to do. But I think it's really imperative for people to understand that economic recovery is linked completely to the health of the people in the state. We are not going to get back on track if we don't take our health seriously, as far as trying to do everything we can to be careful of COVID, put the risk of COVID, and get vaccinated as quickly as possible. Big part of the reason, obviously, for having the system that we have right now with Maine state government of virtual hearings is so that we didn't have outbreaks here that would spread across the state, spread to businesses, that would make it harder for business to operate. And I think that's obviously very important. In my community right now, one of the schools in my district is having a major outbreak, and so we have to understand that having economic recovery is going to be tied directly to the health of the people in the state. And I know most people understand that, but it is a huge issue, and so we want to get back on track. LD1 was a big part of trying to make it better for business workers, people in the state. And we have a number of bills that are designed to try and make it easier for businesses to operate in this world that we're in right now. But first and foremost, again, wanting to make sure that people understand that we know how hard it has been for all of you, and we definitely appreciate that, and certainly trying to work with all of our colleagues to come up with legislation that is going to help is and should be the priority for all of us. So I'll let it go at that. Look forward to taking some questions and talking more about priorities, and passing it on to a good friend, Senator Timberlake.
Senator Timberlake?
My family's been farming on the same family farm since 1803, and I'm an 8th generation farmer with the 9th and 10th setting out there. I think it's important to understand that there isn't a business in the world, and I understand, and our caucus understands, that doesn't want to keep their employees safe, because that's what makes all of our companies viable and makes us operate. And I appreciate everything the chamber has done to help us and assist businesses up and down the state with abiding by the rules and learning what we had to do that. Some of the things that I think that come to mind that's happening through this time in this point in time in our session is that small businesses represent about 460,000 of our state employees that don't work for the state but work for our small businesses, and it's in a big sector of our economy. And we're supplying billions and billions of dollars. And our caucus looks at it as being, it's our job to make sure that these people are working, getting good paying jobs, and taking care of things. And our priorities in this legislative session are going to be, probably first and foremost, that's coming to the top is the PPP tax conformity. It's a top issue out there right now. Businesses went into this thinking that they was going to conform to the same as the federal. Coming to find out that maybe it isn't, maybe it is. I think we're working to get that. I know our caucus is standing very strong. It's something that I learned about in a conversation we had, and I brought it forward to the chamber as soon as I heard about it so that we could all be working together on the same issue. I think it's important from here on out that we all work together collaboratively and try to figure out solutions to keep Maine businesses open and working. One of the things that I've learned through my own businesses that the cost of doing business has risen tremendously. And I think it's our job as a legislature to really take a look at making sure we're not passing on more burdens to businesses and more rules and regulations that we would consider unreasonable or unnecessary in this point in time. Our caucus is going to continue to fight to allow businesses to open safe under the current rules and regulations. But I think we need to allow all businesses to open and operate. I think the one thing we've learned out of this is businesses are responsible. Businesses know how to do their job. And I think government needs to stand back and let that happen. I think it's very important that we don't try to overregulate everything. As I said before, there's not one business owner that I've ever met that ever wanted to get themselves sick or their employees sick, that put a dollar above the health of their community or their economy. I don't think that happens. I think that every one of us want to do the very best we can with what we have to work with. And, I think some of the other priorities we're looking at, the governor has promised there'd be no new taxes. We intend to hold this legislative session to that promise. And the PPP is just one example of what we're going to do. And so I don't have a lot more to add than that. I think that our caucus has been a friend to the chamber since day one, and will continue to be, and we'll fight for the people of the state of Maine and what we believe is the right thing to do. And I look forward to answering any questions that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou Ann, and thank you to the chamber and Peter for kicking us off this morning. I do sincerely wish we were all gathered at Sunday River as we have been in the past, sharing hot toddies, some local beer. I'd probably be bragging about all the wonderful brews that are on tap from my own hometown here of Biddeford. And of course, we'd be supporting our friends who depend on good snow to do business during Maine winters. Yeah, I was saying how strange it has been to obviously not be with all of you this year, but also to start the session off in a way that we obviously have not in the past, with legislative committees meeting remotely. Senator Jackson and I hosted a telephone town hall with Maine seniors where over 1,500 people joined us a few weeks ago to share stories about how the pandemic has impacted their lives. And so, we're certainly feeling the distance as much as ever. It's been difficult, but I'm definitely heartened by the ways Mainers have rolled up their sleeves to continue caring for their communities. The way you've kept the lights on and kept Mainers on the payroll is a testament to just how resilient and resourceful Maine's businesses are. I'm certainly proud to represent Maine because of all the hard work that we've had to do over the last year or so to keep things going. As mentioned, I have the pleasure of serving as Speaker of the House. It's my first term as Speaker. Definitely could not have imagined, stepping into this role at a time like this. But I know how important it's going to be to have leaders like the ones that I get to be on this panel with this morning, who are committed to working together to solve the challenges that we face. Because perhaps unlike any time before, Maine people don't expect us to bring forward solutions that have a Democratic brand on it or Republican branding on it. They just expect us to come together and produce solutions, because the problems and the challenges that we face as a state are too paramount. The urgency is too tremendous for us to be focused on who gets credit. And I think that's really important. I'm really thankful that I have the chance to work with President Jackson, Senator Timberlake, and Representative Dillingham in the upcoming session. For me, in terms of priorities in the caucus, I continue to care about attracting and retaining our young people here in the state of Maine, keeping Maine seniors in their homes. I consider my greatest passion to be growing and modernizing our career and technical education opportunities here in the state, which I think is a key way to rebuilding our workforce for the future. We know, especially during the pandemic, I think a lot of people have been at home thinking about the things they don't like about their house and things that they maybe projects maybe they put off for quite a while. And they've been calling up folks in the trades, and they're quickly realizing that those folks are really, really busy right now, and they have a lot of work, and they're just not enough workers out in those fields. And in some cases, there's businesses, small businesses, where the owner is set to retire, and he's got a list of clients, people that he's built relationships with over the many years, and it's a business that's in a good position to be handed off to someone young, and that person isn't there. And those are the things that I'm worried about and focused on. And I think these are issues that are bipartisan. I think nonpartisan. I think these are the kinds of issues that we can work together to solve. And I think we will, hopefully, in the upcoming session.
So good morning. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this forum on behalf of the House Republican Caucus. With a caucus filled with so many talented men and women, leaders in their own right, I'm honored to once again serve as the House Republican leader in the 130th legislature. The 130th legislature looks different from the 129th. To begin with, there are more Republican members this session, which is wonderful. This will be of particular importance as we enter into budget negotiations. We have, for the first time in 4 years, a new speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to work with Speaker Fecteau, who I believe to be an honest broker and fair-minded. I also know we have a mutual respect for the House as an institution. Looking ahead to this session, the House Republicans are focused broadly on setting priorities underscored by the pandemic. These include economic growth, reestablishing the legislature as a co-equal branch of government, education, and health. The last 2 weeks have focused on tax conformity, and Republicans support full conformity, and it is my hope that when the tax committee meets for the third time to discuss this issue on Tuesday, there will finally be a vote on the Republican proposal to fully conform. Aligning Maine's tax code with the December changes made by Congress is of a fundamental importance to the health of our businesses and their employees. Maine has already seen the loss of many businesses assessing an income tax on the PPP loans they received, and that will drive them more into the ground. This program was created to keep our businesses open and our citizens employed through this pandemic. If we are to reverse the impacts of the shutdowns and the constantly evolving regulations, there must be some remnants of the economy left to start from. The first step the legislature can do to ensure that is to pass tax conformity. And this means setting a budget that is well within the state's resources. We need to implement policies without growing government or increasing taxes. The state's revenue streams are suffering because people are suffering, and simply trying to take more from people who have less than they did a year ago only serves to deepen our economic hole. We should re-examine our minimum wage laws to help stop the loss of employment opportunities. We should codify changes made through executive order under the emergency proclamation that ease licensing requirements and suspend regulations. The elimination of this red tape to assist Maine businesses should be made permanent. Let's get the government out of the way so Mainers can get back to work and new life can be breathed into struggling sectors like the forest products industry. This vital part of Maine's economy has suffered both as a result of the pandemic, but also in the loss and value of large capital investment by industry leaders and their facilities. We're ready to work with the governor in identifying government roadblocks driving out this industry and hurting those depending upon it. Losing industries we have historically relied on requires us to invest in our career and technical schools that provide the necessary training to transition to new opportunities. I look forward to working with Speaker Fecteau to support this vital area of education. We presently have a crisis in education as students, despite the Herculean efforts of our teachers, continue to lose ground. We already see it in the legislature that attempting to progress as normal through a virtual setting is incredibly slow, as today, and it is frustrating. I continually hear from my committee leads and members, especially new members, about their frustrations and concerns. Our teachers' experience is no different. No one can be on the same page because almost no one is in the same room, and so our ability to communicate and move forward is slowed. Now imagine your son or daughter is heading to second grade, but because of this situation, they aren't going to hit their reading benchmarks for second grade. Or you're a high school student who needs Algebra 2, but you haven't advanced far enough in Algebra 1 to take the class. How are we going to deal with the remediation that will be required in the aftermath of our school closures? How are we going to best support the teachers in making that remediation happen? This isn't a partisan issue, and it will take the legislature along with the administration to fully address the issues before us. Economic growth depends on a dynamic, robust, and rigorous education system, and that means getting more money into the classroom. It means reviewing what did work over the last 11 months and making sure that those things continue. And when I say what did work, it is what's worked for the student. Our collective effort should always be to put the student first and support what ensures the best student outcomes. We must address the fact that school closures have led to declines in public school enrollments as parents have sought alternatives. We must work with parents to make sure our investment of their money in education is meeting their expectations and serving their children's needs. And this is just not in our public primary and secondary schools, but also our post-secondary institutions. Both our public universities and community colleges need to be in the business of serving Maine people. We need a workforce prepared for jobs in healthcare sector as well as other STEM areas. Certainly, a global pandemic has highlighted the needs we have in healthcare, and like with economic growth, we need to implement policies that increases competition, transparency to drive down costs and increase access to quality care. We continue to see government attempts to control costs, but government cannot even control its own costs and shouldn't be expected to control the costs of other industries. We should work with small businesses to implement insurance reforms that will allow them to offer a benefit at lower costs. We should work for price transparency and ensure government isn't in the way of providers investing in innovative ways to deliver quality care. This pandemic has hopefully taught us to value our good health, respect the health of others, and warned us that health privacy can quickly be lost. And since last March, we have seen a change in the way government operates, and it is this that has spurred my own proposal to changing the emergency powers statute. My bill isn't alone, and I believe you see so many proposals because it's imperative that we must return to a properly balanced and functioning government. The state's emergency power statute exists because the legislature back in the 50s foresaw the need to have the chief executive move quickly in emergency, but they could not have foreseen an emergency power statute that would be enacted due to a pandemic and remove the legislature from governing. This isn't about who serves as governor now or even who the members of the 130th legislature are, but rather about asserting the legislative branch's role and responsibility in governing the state. Unfortunately, the tools at our disposal as a legislature to insert ourselves back into the pandemic discussion are limited. This is a disservice to the individuals that we represent. And I've often unnecessarily been told that the governor serves all of Maine. My reply to that is that collectively the legislature also serves all of Maine. We also are more apt to hear directly from those we serve than the executive is. If we are out in our communities, our constituents don't hesitate to tell us what they believe we are doing right or wrong. Our constituents also don't hesitate in calling us directly or even stopping by our homes. That is a direct access that they do not have to whoever the sitting governor is. That is how their voice is heard in government, and if we aren't part of the conversation of mandates being issued and rules being changed through an emergency, then their voice is not adequately heard either. What we are proposing is a statutory change that after 30 days, the legislature should be consulted and vote to affirm the continuation of any emergency proclamation, along with a few other changes to the statute. Again, we recognize the need to act quickly and decisively, but those decisions should never be done in isolation, and after 30 days should be done without legislative input. We are concerned with that. The legislature will certainly have our differences in the coming months, and I hope that we can come together on setting priorities and ensuring the citizen legislature we all proudly serve has a voice in the decisions that impact everyday Mainers. I look forward to the work of this session and with continuing to work with my legislative leaders, and thank you for inviting me to participate.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to get that insight on your caucus and your own thoughts. I want to move to a question for each of you, and this time I'll start with the House members about the pandemic. So my own personal experience, and I think though everyone that I talk to recognizes that the significant challenges that the pandemic has created, but also people talk about opportunities. And I think some of you have touched on some of those. And in the context of what we've heard about basically what I consider to be a roadmap for our economic future, we now have a 10-year economic development plan. We have recommendations from the Recovery Committee, and then we have measures of growth that helps, in theory, if everyone pays attention to it and honors what we're hearing and seeing, our metrics that can help us. Would you mind, I'll start with you, Ryan. Would you mind just sharing, what do you see as a significant opportunity that presented itself with the pandemic, and in the context of the roadmap I just talked about, how do we leverage that opportunity? What's it going to take?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Luann. I think that's a really good question. It's, I think, something that's on the mind of a lot of us. I think while we recognize the fact that the pandemic has obviously caused a lot of hardship, no doubt, whether it's a business that's been struggling to make ends meet, or family that's been struggling to make ends meet, people have been confronting challenges on numerous fronts. At the same time, as we see the pandemic exposing a lot of the vulnerabilities in our communities, in our society, I think that there presents opportunity for us to maybe finally get our arms around some of the challenges that have impacted our communities for a long time. Take, for example, childcare. It's been no secret that childcare has been a challenge for Maine families for quite a while. Whether it's a matter of access to childcare or affordability of childcare, we know that it's been a challenge for Maine families. The pandemic, really brought that to bear when, first of all, childcare facilities were deemed essential, and they were able to remain open because of the important role they play in our economy and making sure working moms and dads can get to work, and I think that's really important. We also know that the folks that are working in childcare facilities are not paid very well in most instances. So, how do we address making sure that the value that we clearly place on childcare in this state, that the earnings are reflective of that, but also that the job of working in childcare is reflective of a career ladder. So I have a bill, for example, that would first and foremost create a wage supplement for childcare workers, giving them a boost in their pay. But additionally, it seeks to find ways in which we can translate the experience that they have in childcare into a credential and or credit towards a 4-year degree in education, for example. So that we're not just saying, you can work in childcare forever and that experience be worth nothing in terms of getting you further up a career ladder in education, for example. So, that's one example. I'm also encouraged. CNN had an article they released, I think 4 days ago or so, that showed Maine is second or third in the nation, just confirming, in terms of inbound residents. So I think Idaho leads the country. I think a lot of folks leaving California, moving to Idaho, and then North Carolina, and then Maine stands third in terms of inbound residents. I think that's clearly a huge opportunity. We're a state that has long been struggling to attract people to stay here. Our young people first and foremost, but also getting families to move to Maine. And clearly, the pandemic has presented an opportunity that I think is really something we need to take advantage of. We need to make sure that, I think, what seems to be New Yorkers and maybe some folks from New Jersey who have left their states, that they not only move to Maine in the short term, but they move to Maine in the long term.
So, Luann, I only heard part of what you said, but I'm going to go along the same strain of the question that was asked to the speaker and talk about some of the things that I think have been a benefit. I think telehealth is something that I know we were starting to kind of find our way into. And I remember sitting 2 years ago having a discussion about what that would look like. I think that we now have jumped in full force. I think that certainly coming from rural areas, that's a benefit that I hope that we continue to find the areas that need to be adjusted when dealing with telehealth and move forward with that. I think remote participation, certainly in all levels of government, allowing that is something that we should continue going forward. Municipal level, having the ability for folks who may not want to go and sit in a meeting, but want to be involved and see what's going on in their locally in their government, to be able to participate remotely in that as well as even watching a lot of our legislative proceedings now remotely, not everyone having the ability to travel to Augusta to sit in on a committee hearing or a meeting of the legislative leadership, be able to participate and watch that remotely, I think is a benefit, certainly, as well as in education. I know that in speaking with teachers over the past year, there are those students certainly that are struggling with the remote aspect of education, but then there are those students that maybe they hadn't participated as much or been able to be reached as much, seem to be thriving in this sort of format. So I hope that those are all things that we continue to have discussions about and recognize their viability and move forward with just growing those different fields.
That's great. Thank you. Senator Jackson, your thoughts on opportunities?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think one of the things, today is a bit of a preview of some of the challenge that we have across the state with broadband. And, we had, worked through time here to try and get more service to people across the state. And, had challenges with, having a bond package that would, put broadband on the same kind of map as roads and bridges, part of our infrastructure that's needed. Unfortunately, with COVID, we've certainly understood now more than ever how this has been a problem for people across the state. Even here at the State House, we've had challenges with broadband, connectivity and had to work through that. And so this has brought that very much to the forefront, understanding that, we're going to have to do this ourselves, and we're going to have to invest so that people across the state, will be able to compete, will be able to be part of the economy. Speaker Fecteau talked about the influx of people coming into Maine, which is a good thing. But oftentimes you get those questions. Well, I think it's probably one of the first questions that you get is, well, what's the broadband like in that area? Or if somebody have a piece of land or a home, they want to know if they can get connected. And if you say no, they're probably not going to buy that home or move to that area. And that's just unfortunate for a lot of parts of the state. And the people that do live there, shouldn't be behind the 8 ball because the state hasn't been willing to invest in more rural parts of the state. So, I mean, we've seen that because of COVID. It's really unfortunate. Obviously, COVID crisis. I mean, obviously, I wish it never happened. The people that we've lost, the economy, everything that's happened because of this. But one of the things that is brought out is that we should all be very understanding that we have to invest across the state to make broadband accessible to everyone, not just those in the urban areas. And even in the urban areas, we have challenges. I think the other thing about it, and Representative Dillingham mentioned it, way back, 6, 8 years ago, some of you probably remember the main span that, we had here at the Capitol. Unfortunately, we weren't able to keep that going. But for me, having a district that, I'm over 300 miles away from home, it's been challenging over the years, having, constituents understand what's going on in state government, because, there wasn't any ability to tune in and see what was going on. And then for reasons I still don't understand, even the audio of committee hearings and things like that hasn't been accessible. You have to request audio for committee hearings and things like that. Now, again, I wish it never had come to pass, but because of COVID, we're going to have a very accessible state government for people all across the state if they do have, internet capacity. And that'll never change from here on out. I mean, because of this. So I think that's, another really good thing about a silver lining in what has been an awful 10, 11-month section. But, those are some of the things that I see as benefits of the COVID crisis. Some businesses have, really done a lot to change their model. And I think that obviously is a good thing, but there's a lot of people that obviously have struggled in this because of the type of business that they had. And we need to, work to help those people. I'm also very concerned about all the businesses that didn't get, PPP assistance for different reasons, that have been left out and feel very left behind by their state and federal government. But trying to make those investments here in this session, I think, is very important.
Thank you. Senator Timberlake, you're up.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'm going to speak from some of the things you've already heard. And one of the comments I'm going to make up front is no business is ever going to operate the same again. And nor is any consumer ever going to shop the same ways they've shopped again. Everything has changed. Every business has changed. From our own personal businesses, from shopping online to ordering in advance to curbside pickup to everything that's happened. These are all things that have changed the way Maine business is going to operate. And those are all important things to remember as we move forward in this legislative session to make sure that we make adjustments to allow these businesses to do that. One of the things that have happened through this is, you can now, with your takeout order, you can get an alcoholic beverage to go with it. These are some adjustments we made. We're going to need to continue to make adjustments to allow businesses and consumers to shop the way they want to shop. I think it's one of the most interesting things that I see happening, from our own businesses on, we're talking about putting in now drive-throughs and different things because the future has changed. Zoom meetings, God, I hate them. It's just, we're seeing today with the problems we're having here. I'm hearing from my committee members in the committees that they're doing the very best they can. They're struggling, but they're still very, very hard. I mean, it's going to be worked on. As Kathleen mentioned, Representative Dillingham mentioned, telehealth. I've used it myself and so forth, and it's working. The adjustments we've made to telehealth, that's going to continue to go forward. broadband, as Senator Jackson mentioned, I'm not convinced that broadband running lines is going to be the answer, because at $35,000 a mile, approximately, it'll take us forever to get it done. I think there's some other things to look at in the broadband. It's very important. There's Starlinks, the cellular services are now coming out with 5Gs that is going to reach rural Maine at a much higher rate and much faster time. So I think we need to keep our minds open in state government of not just getting hung up on only doing things one way. And just like the pandemic's changed the way business operates, the pandemic's got to change the way the state government operates. And I think it's something that, looking into the future, something we have to keep an open mind on everything we deal with going forward. And those are the changes that I see, and I consider them all opportunities, not necessarily all bad things. It's a chance for us to take a look at the way we do things and make changes to the positive.
Thank you. I want to just check real quick to make sure that Representative Dillingham can hear me this time as I'm speaking. I'm afraid she can't. You can. Great, because I want to start with you this time and here's the question. So every one of you touched on the changes to the way either we do business or state government operates, or the way we order food. It's all changes. I'm curious, something that I have heard, I've experienced myself in watching bills, and lots of folks in business and members of the chamber have talked about this, and it's concept bills, and which for lots of people that's an issue to begin with. But in a session that's remote, can you share with me your perspective on that, and what should we do about what seems to be a prolific number of concept bills? And the ability for Mainers to participate in the legislative process in the way that it's intended, particularly given this virtual legislature that we're having. And I'll start with you, Representative Dillingham.
Sure, thank you. I think that certainly this might be a in tandem answer, myself along with the speaker, on how we hope to address that in the House. And it's more, for me, it's more than concept bills. It also goes to when you're in a work session and a amendment is being dropped in the work session. I think it's important that if a committee is working, and we've had this conversation with my leads, that if a committee is working something that's going to be a concept bill, that process has to be slowed down. You folks, your membership in the chamber, they should be able to have some sort of prior notice or given them a time frame so that they can see the language that's being proposed. The same thing when you're dealing with an amendment within the committee. Normally, there would be representation within the committee room that they could actually take a look at this copy of what's being presented, and either reach out and speak to the chairs, the leads, any members to express any concern, support, thoughts that they have. And we're missing that now without being able to have that quick contact and communication. So I'm hoping that when we're dealing with concept drafts, amendments, that we slow down that process to give it time for them to be fully vetted with the public, whether it's members of the lobby, members of the chamber, or just individuals that may have a vested interest in that piece of legislation, to make sure that we don't move so quickly that their voice is not heard. I think that is the biggest issue that we face, aside from the technical frustrations and concerns my members have and I have. It's making sure that we don't cut out unintentionally the voice of those that we represent when we're dealing with bill proposals.
Great. Your thoughts, Representative Fecteau?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Representative Dillingham on many of the points you just made. We actually had a concept draft that was scheduled for a public hearing in one of the committees, and they scheduled it not realizing it was a concept draft, and they asked for permission to reschedule the public hearing until there was language that the public could see and understand what the bill is. So I think we do our due diligence to ensure that before there's a public hearing on a concept draft that there's actual language and that the bill is ready to be heard with all of its details. I understand why they exist. That with cloture occurring in December, obviously, there are issues that arise during session, and folks look for a vehicle to pursue addressing those issues. So it's always a bit of a balance. I would like to see not so many concept drafts, but it's certainly part of the process, and I would echo Representative Dillingham in making sure that the public has all the details they need in order for the process to work the way it's intended, which is to weigh in on what exactly the bill is trying to accomplish and trying to address. So I think we'll continue to do our best to ensure that's the case.
Great. Senator Timberlake.
Yes. Concept bills is something that's been around, and I don't agree wholeheartedly with them, because I don't have a problem with them coming out. I had a concept bill that we put in at the beginning of the session. We've withdrawn it. We put it in because we was waiting for language to arrive. And I think concept bills can come out, but before they should be referenced to the committee, the language should be in the bill, and it should be in the bill 2 weeks for the public to have a chance to look at it before it's referenced to committee and it has a public hearing. In that way, people get to see it and draft it. It shouldn't go to the committee as a concept and be tentatively heard at the committee at the concept. But to have a concept bill because of, as Representative Fecto said, Speaker said, that, sometimes you do it because you're working with a group that's coming forward with some language and you want to do it. But just to hold a bill, we have a process in Ledge Council that if we need to create a bill to address with a situation, we have a path to do that. Ledge Council can get together and vote on letting a bill be heard or not heard. So I understand concept bills, but I think that concept bills, as I said, should be printed at least 2 weeks before they're heard. So that's my opinion.
Great. I want to, we've got 7 minutes left. I just want to, if we can, Peter, are there any questions in the chat that we need to respond to?
We did get a question, and this is how it reads. I understand the budget is the major policy issue this year, but last session a task force was created to examine a 4-year technical high school in Maine. The questioner is wondering if that type of long-term planning project is something we could see action on this year.
Yeah, let's go to Senator Jackson for this first.
No, let's go to Representative Fecto. He's the tech.
That's a pass.
I have to admit that I am not familiar with that bill necessarily. I don't know whose bill it was, but I don't think it made it to the floor for a vote. So if it was down in education, it was down there with a lot of other bills that I'm unaware of, but maybe Senator Timberlake or Representative Dillingham have a better understanding of that particular bill.
I'd have to say I'm not. I know that we had the discussions around bringing back,
I'd have to
tech
screen up.
classes.
Let me see if I'm in the green room right now.
Senator Timberlake or Representative Dillingham have a better understanding of that particular bill.
And then I'd probably have to.
I don't know if should I keep talking? I don't know.
Keep talking.
Okay. So I remember that we talked about, we had bill that was discussion about bringing the tech classes back to high schools. We certainly talked about, there were some different CTE bills about funding. There were bills around actually who could teach those classes, both I think at the high school and college levels, but I don't ever remember having a discussion around a bill that would basically they were talking about a magnet school just around tech education. And I apologize. I don't have any memory of a magnet school around tech education. Interesting topic and conversation. Certainly would love to continue to have the conversation about it. It's a interesting idea. So I think that many people would be interested in that.
Yeah, and I do know that Senator Woodsom has a bill this session that will address a number of gaps in career and technical education, trying to make sure that students can enroll in courses earlier, because there's sometimes limitations on what grade level they are before they can enroll in CTE courses. So it's not exactly the creation of a 4-year high school that is CTE focused, but it will allow for more opportunities for young people to get into CTE courses. So I would definitely follow his bill, which I'm a proud co-sponsor of.
And I just would chime in that, I heard of all the things that we talked about letting teachers that maybe didn't have all of the right credentials teach shop and teach automotive technology and different things. But I don't remember ever seeing a bill that was going to create the magnet school, but fully supportive expansion of shop and home economics and those things. It's something that I think that's very important to our students.
So I didn't see the magnet school bill either, but I would be remiss to say we have a great magnet school in Limestone that very, very happy to have people come and tour. As far as the question though, I mean, having education, vocational or anything like that, a big supporter. I mean, the JMG program, been a big, huge support. I mean, we all have. I mean, I think those are all obviously very great programs to get students involved in that field, but those fields. But anything else that came forward, I'd certainly be interested in looking at. I mean, apprenticeship programs, training like that. I mean, I think anything we can do to make people's career paths easier and get them, into our workforce is just smart on all of our parts.
Great.
I've only got
So
one
we have,
complaint though.
Oh.
I just got one complaint.
Sorry.
It's obvious Senator Jackson has better internet in his office than I have in mine. I'm just saying that down the hall.
Come on down. I'll put my mask on.
So we have 2 minutes left. So here's the lightning round question for all of you. Well, really 2, so you'll have to be quick. And the way I'm looking at you, sort of the Hollywood squares, it will go Senator Timberlake, Representative Dillingham, Representative Fecto, and then Senator Jackson in that order. So 2 quick questions. Do you envision getting to a point this session where the legislature will meet on a regular basis in person? And what about accepting front-facing testimony?
God, I hope so. My goal is yes. I think it can be done. Other businesses are doing it. I think we can.
I hope so as well. I think federal government's doing it. Businesses are doing it. I think that we can manage to find a way to do that. And as far as front-facing testimony, I suggested the idea. I think in Ledge Council, if I remember when it all runs together, possibly looking at trying to do some sort of sit out in your vehicle, we'll queue you up and we'll let you know when you can enter the building so that we don't have tons of people in the building, but enter the building, go directly to a room to provide your testimony, hoping that we can kind of delve into looking at that idea and maybe get to that.
Good idea.
I think we'll definitely be regularly meeting in person once we get to the point where we're going to be passing bills between the bodies. Once the committee reports are coming out, we are set up to convene at the Civic Center. I think we'll be in person to do that work on a regular basis as bills come out of committee. As far as front-facing testimony, I think we need to make sure that we can do that safely, and we need to follow the science and follow the best health practices. And as of right now, I just don't think that's viable.
Same here. I mean, I definitely hope so. As obviously vaccines roll out, hopefully there is a world. I mean, the legislature will be meeting in person at some point and then ongoing, but I certainly hope as soon as possible. There isn't one legislator that likes the way that this is going right now, but it's the only option we have right now.
Great. So because of internet issues in Glenburn, Maine, I wasn't able to get started the way I had hoped to, but I do want to say that this has always been my favorite part of the summit, and it's been a real honor to be the moderator, even if it was a little glitchy at the beginning. So thank you all really very much. And I think I pass this off to Dana or someone besides me takes the lead now.
Hi, I'm Dana Connors, President of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. We have some exciting news to share with you. We have a live stream show that we're going to bring to you each and every week. On that show, we'll be discussing issues of importance to you. Maybe they're issues happening at the state capitol. Maybe they're on Main Street. Whatever they are, we are going to share them with you. So stay tuned. Check us out every Monday at 3 p.m. Go to our website, mainechamber.org. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Maine has two histories. The first is the story of the people who lived here, built communities, and supported their families. The other tells how the land itself was raised, the mountains of ice that shaped it, the forests above, and the vast hidden waters below. For Poland Spring, those histories intersect here, and Nestle Waters is committed to helping preserve them both. That means helping to protect the legacy of one of Maine's oldest brands. But it's also sending water trucks to fires and bottled water to first responders, environmental education for students, and the most extensive water monitoring program in the state. Because the Poland Spring brand has always supported life in Maine, from its beginning at a single source to a statewide company with almost 900 employees. Poland Spring is a part of Maine's history and has a place in Maine's heart.
Hi, I'm Mark Ellis from the Maine State Chamber of Commerce. As a complement to what we just heard from our legislative leaders, it's now time to hear from our business leaders. Today's second panel will offer their insights about the issues we've discussed during the course of the past few days. And they'll also discuss how these issues might help or hinder the economic growth that we hope to achieve in the coming years. Moderating today's second panel is the Maine State Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors' second chair and treasurer, Chris Condon of United Insurance. Chris currently serves as United's treasurer after playing a variety of roles within the company, including president, chief executive officer, and senior partner. Chris has also held a variety of leadership positions in civic organizations such as the Maine Insurance Agents Association Board, the Rotary Club of Presque Isle, the United Way of Aroostook, the Aroostook Mental Health Corp, and the Presque Isle Snowmobile Club. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning to you, Mark, and thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Very glad to be here today, and our panel today features four wonderful business leaders from various sectors of our economy. They have graciously agreed to share with us their perspective on legislative issues that encourage or detract from their companies to invest in or grow in Maine. We live in what I consider to be the best state in the union, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists as to how we can best position Maine for the future. So please join me in welcoming our panelists: Dave Barber from Tyson Foods, Doug McGowan from Woodard and Curran, Nikki Morton of Casco Bay Food and Beverage, and the Honorable Brian Langley of Union River Lobster Pot. To get this conversation going, Dave, if you could take a few moments and speak to what state tax policy is doing to help or hinder our business work.
Sure, Chris, and thanks for hosting today. You know, there's a few things that I'd like to talk through, and one of them is tax conformity, and tax conformity is one of those issues that we've heard a lot about. I really don't want to spend a ton of time on it. I think everybody understands where the business community lies. You know, don't hinder these tax allowances for struggling Maine businesses. The next big thing on my list is Better Betty. You know, the Barber Foods plant in Portland is highly automated. We invest in millions of dollars of equipment to keep our processes, to keep us competitive. All those things are so important when we're dealing in a state that's not on the main trail of the country. So to take away tax benefits for equipment that we're using to stay competitive just does not seem right. You know, I've looked at the Opega study, and respectfully, I completely disagree with how they term those tax benefits for Maine manufacturers. Another item on my hot list is this packaging bill that we're seeing. You know, conceptually, when you look at trying to make manufacturers responsible for their packaging, that can make some sense. But Maine would be a first in the nation to try to set up and accommodate a very complex bill that not a lot of people really understand how they're going to make work. You know, I'm just not a fan of it. We obviously pack a lot of food products in materials, and I would be very disappointed to try to figure out how this thing would work, because I don't think anybody knows at this point. And lastly, you know, when it comes to taxing, I know people say, hey, let's tax the top earners, let's tax the businesses. They're a primary source of cash that the state can use. Those things really bother me. We're going to chase people out of the state. I don't think that's where we want to be going. I think that we should have a coordinated policy on things like minimum wage. You know, companies that operate in different cities and towns, putting up with multiple minimum wage laws are difficult. And we're seeing a big impact of that with this emergency wage in Portland, how difficult that is for companies to deal with in the short term. And it's problematic. I'd much rather see a state coordinated policy driven by our representative legislature than patchwork processes throughout the state.
Great, thank you, Dave. Doug, Nikki, or Brian, do you have anything you'd like to add in terms of tax policy impacting your respective businesses?
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I concur with what Dave's saying. I think that you can always think of the state as just the state. Maybe it's an island and you can do what you want and then people are stuck to deal with it. But businesses have options, right? I mean, we have 2 offices in Maine and 30 offices not in Maine. We like being here, but it's got to be a conducive environment. So the whole tax issue has to look at the long run. not just, how do we fill some gaps here, but how do we ensure we got an economy that's contributing taxes in the long run.
Thank you. Brian, could you take a few minutes and speak a little bit about educational policy that we might need to position the state?
I'd be happy to. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed it, at least a dozen of these retreats over the years, and it's great to catch up with folks, see a lot of familiar faces. And I think Representative Dillingham hit on it in her talk about what's happening in our schools. My grandson came to live with me between his junior and senior year of high school. He graduated in 2020, so lived with this personally in my house, what's happened. He's now a freshman in college at Eastern Maine Community College, and his girlfriend was going to go to Florida State. She did one semester online and then withdrew. And then, but the good thing of it is that she came back to Maine and now is at the University of Maine. So, listening and watching the kids and hearing what they have to say, a lot of them have kind of checked out of the education system. I talked to a young college student yesterday who was just totally discouraged about being online, misses being in the classroom with his teacher. So, that's at the outset of this. However, in the conversation, I think we have to take stock in the new set of coping skills that students are acquiring. They're figuring out how to make their way through the pandemic. They're figuring out new ways to do schooling and to keep up. And on the flip side of that, I work with a lot of teachers through the Bridge Academy, and talking with social studies teachers last night. I asked them what things will they keep going forward. And a lot of them had to modify some assignments and to meet the needs of their students, and found that they created really good, new assignments that would help students learn. So there's a lot of things that have come out of this. But one of the things that I wanted to point out in this was, and how industry can play a big part in partnering with our educational institutions. When the pandemic landed on us and forced the hospitality industry to adapt, Hospitality Maine, we joined, I sit on their education board, foundation board, joined with Eastern Maine Community College to launch a COVID-19 training program. We started in late April, early May, and by Memorial Day, there was an online digital training program for food service and restaurant workers. First weekend, I think it launched at about 155, and the next week we're up to 500. Over 3,500 people have gotten that credential, and I think over 10,000 people have availed themselves of the training. And so what that has sparked in the industry is to create, a brand new post-COVID Welcome Maine customer service course, leading to a digital badge and taking into consideration how post-COVID-19 is going to work. But here's the bigger plan, and that's to create a series of these non-credit bearing industry credentials, and then working with the community college to be able to stack those up into credit bearing and leading to a degree. And part of the conversation is how do we get more of our workforce with a credential or a degree of value. The goal is to have 60% by the year 2025. So, what the industry has been saying to us and listening to them say, look, due to rising labor costs, we're going to work with less people, but they're going to have more skills. So we've seen some great, this partnership's been a fabulous one. So here's the message about how that would translate to someone like myself, who owns a small business on the coast of Maine, who works with kids that come in. So all of my staff, I had every single person that works for me take the training. And then to be able to tell a 15-year-old or 16-year-old student that they're starting to build their credentials towards a college degree is a huge message. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I think in this day and age, industry's got to come to the table, and they certainly have been. And I think Hospitality Maine and the community college really set the kind of a standard of now that'll be able to work on going forward.
Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts on education? Great, thanks. Nikki, the environment in Maine is central to an awful lot of good things that happen here. Could you speak a little bit in terms of you and your business and what type of policy we need to position the state as it relates to our environment?
Sure. Thank you, Chris. So, I believe that innovation and R&D around renewable energy provides critical benefits that is going to help Maine's economy overall. First, as Governor Mills mentioned earlier today, clean energy innovation and subsequent construction is going to bring good paying jobs to Maine, which in itself is going to attract new Mainers to our state. And secondly, as you know, energy costs are one of the highest operating costs for small businesses. And Maine is not an inexpensive state to do business in. And by being able to lower those energy costs, will attract new businesses to our state. And I think having those lower energy costs will make us more competitive with our neighboring states, as well as with states all up and down the eastern seaboard, which again will attract new businesses, new Mainers, which is critical for those of us that are here, especially in the service industry, which will allow us to expand our business. And we're very excited to see those plans in the strategic plan for the state and capitalizing on those issues.
Good, thank you. Other thoughts on how we leverage our environment to improve our economy? All right, thank you.
Sure.
Doug,
Yeah.
the governor, go ahead.
No,
Doug,
go
the
ahead,
governor
Chris.
this morning talked about her 10-year strategic plan. Could you give us a little insight on how you see that impacting your company and the ultimate execution of it as a policy?
Sure. And first of all, I want to thank you for putting me on this panel with all these titans of the food industry. But unless they had clean water, they couldn't perform. And that's what we do. We're an environmental firm. And so I'll just touch on a little bit of what Nikki just said. Our environmental quality is a core aspect of who we are and how our success will be as an organization. The 10-year plan, the 10-year strategic plan that was created, I think is an exceptional document. I'm not going to review it. Everybody should. If you have not read that yet, you should. But I will restate what the 10-year vision is. And by 2030, Maine will be an international leader with a vibrant, sustainable, environmentally responsible economy. All across the state, the people of Maine will have access to unmatched quality of life and good paying jobs. That's a pretty bold statement, but it's very achievable. But the power of a strategic plan isn't the statement or isn't the paper that it's written on. It is to guide people in thinking strategically and acting strategically. And I think that's where there's a challenge. Bruce Wagner was one of the ones leading that. Bruce serves on my board, and Bruce is very adamant about executing plans, not just writing plans. And so when I think about the governor's 10-year plan, I think it's perfect. It's a pretty bold plan. In fact, many aspects in that plan are the same things that we would be trying to drive forward as an organization, serving clients across the country. But the difference is I can make choices about what things we're going to invest in, what things we're not going to invest in, whether those things are going to accelerate the plan or get in the way of the plan. And this is what I think the issue we have is the nexus between what is a smart and strategically minded long-term plan and what we do or what the legislation does to support that plan often is what bogs it down. And it's particularly complicated by the cycle of changes in administration, potentially every 4 years or every 8 years. This is a 10-year plan, not a 4-year plan, not a 2-year plan. And so I would implore the legislators to really read it, understand it. I realize they all have to speak to their constituents, but they also have an obligation to look out for their constituents. And I think that is a process of balancing the short-term wants with what the real long-term needs are to recreate a very vibrant economy. I thought the governor said it exceptionally well earlier. I think she said, somebody asked what was the keys to moving this forward. She said one was good messaging and the other is a unified effort. And I couldn't be in stronger agreement with that. It is about messaging and it is about sort of getting behind it. And what that really is about branding. And I think we're on the cusp of an extraordinary opportunity to reposition this state in a post-COVID world. Others have talked before us about people coming to the state, wanting to stay in the state. We have a lot to offer naturally. And with a good strategic plan and the policies behind it, we can not only convince people to come here, but we can convince them to stay here and keep businesses here. So it's a great plan. I don't think we need more writing. We need strategic thinking and strategic acting aligned with policy and procedures.
Good, thanks. Any other thoughts from the rest of you?
Chris, I'd like to, to add to what Doug just said. He's spot on. And what I think it would be really important for this session of the legislature to do would be to look through the lens on every single piece of legislation. Does it promote this 10-year plan or does it hinder it? As chair of the Education Committee, I developed a scoring mechanism for legislative policy, education policy, with some benchmarks like that in mind. For example, capacity to serve all kids in the state of Maine, et cetera. So, with limited funding and budgets in a pinch, I think that would be a great lens to look through. Are we promoting, are we pushing forward, advancing this economic plan, or is it, hindering it? Is it going to get in the way of achieving our goals? And the plan speaks a lot to education. I spent a little bit of time just a minute ago talking about stackable credentials. Our CTEs are incredibly important in that, we're going to be swapping one problem for another once we get out of the pandemic. We're going to be, right back into a workforce crisis. In my field, hospitality industry, lost 28,000 jobs due to this. There are other industries that have, thrived and they can't find enough people. So I think just getting rid of anything that's extraneous outside of that lens of this economic strategic plan would be kind of wise and prudent in this session.
Good. It's a great point that when I think about the 10-year plan, what I'm hearing is how do we as business owners, business leaders, and how does the chamber engage our legislators to look through that lens? Do you have thoughts on how we could accomplish that?
I do, and that is really, and maybe it's folks that do like the Measures of Growth, Maine Development Foundation. You've got Educate Maine, which does a lot of benchmarking in the education arena, and sit and just develop that. For educators call it a rubric. It's kind of a bit of a scoring mechanism. What are we looking for? I did that kind of work when we were looking at bondings. I saw Luann on earlier when he sat on a task force for Maine's 21st century workforce, but really just come up with some criteria that say this is what we need the highest level work. And there's a lot of smart people around that could kind of sit and develop just a little bit of a checklist and say, look, this meets this is biggest bang for the buck. Let's push this one.
Thank you. Now, I like the way you worded that. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Chris, let me add. I think you're right on with what you're saying, and you referred to this thing, right? We've already got KPIs, right? Key performance metrics. It's an incredible job that the group behind this does. We've got a Maine Can't Wait climate plan, which I think is an outstanding plan. Those three documents that we're talking about really are the formation of any great fundamental strategy. In fact, when you think about the 10-year plan, the three important tenets in that, well, there's many, but the one about talent, the one about innovation, the one about infrastructure, they're the same things that us in the private sector are driving. We're trying to attract talent. We're trying to create innovation and new ideas. We're trying to build our infrastructure so we can pivot and work from home and things like that, right? If the state is doing those things, businesses are going to recognize that and they're going to come here. I don't think we have to invent anything new. Just follow the plan and absolutely, let's make sure we're putting it through a lens. And I think we've got those lenses already. And let's be hard on ourselves to make sure we're not entertaining notions that detract us from this longer term vision.
I agree. I think we're going to walk away with the word lens in our head clearly. That, like the way Brian put that if we can ask all of ourselves and our legislators to use that lens as they look at this 10-year, at new policy and new potential new laws, then we'll all be in a better place. So thank you. Nikki, healthcare is always front and center for all of us. And when I think about healthcare, I think about healthcare quality and balancing that against healthcare costs. Could you speak a little bit about what type of policy you might see or want as it relates to your company and healthcare?
Sure. Healthcare is another one of those very expensive operating costs for businesses in the state. And I agree that I think Maine offers some very high quality healthcare, especially in the larger metropolitan areas. And I think we all recognize that healthcare in the more rural areas is continuing to be a challenge. I think telemedicine is definitely a step in the right direction in that regard. The cost to provide healthcare insurance for businesses, especially small businesses, can be very cost prohibitive. And that in turn, if you're not able to offer the health insurance coverage to the workers in the state of Maine, that puts a heavier burden on, the government subsidized type programs. I believe that part of the issue, obviously, is Maine has an older population. So I think it becomes even more critical to try to attract, new Mainers, younger Mainers. That obviously widens the insurance pool, which helps keep those healthcare claim costs down. And I also think by broadening competition within healthcare providers is also critical. There's, a small playing field for, small to medium, especially size businesses. Like we have 3 locations. We service 14 out of 16 counties in the state. And for me to find a health insurance provider that provides that same quality coverage and broad access to network providers for all of those different areas where I have employees is challenging. And therefore, it really limits the number of insurance providers that I can consider, because I have to make sure that, folks in the northern part of the state have just as many network providers as my folks that are in the southern part of the state. So again, growing businesses, attracting new businesses, attracting new Mainers, I think is going to considerably help that initiative as well. And then again, just in trying not to overregulate, as I think most small businesses would agree.
Nikki, you bring up a great point about an aging population. What policies or strategies can we have as businesses, or can the state implement on our behalf to attract more young people here? There's a great statistic earlier that Maine is reaping a benefit of being the 3rd best state in the nation in terms of inward migration. I think that comes from one of the national moving companies. But what are you folks doing on your ends to attract youth, and what can the state do to do that? That has to be a major focus of ours, I would think.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely has to be a huge focus. I think the folks at Live Work Maine, they're doing a lot of great things to try to reach out to the younger generations in different parts of the states, and really promoting the benefits that Maine has to offer, from the amenities, the quality of life, the sense of community pretty much that exists throughout the state. And I think they're doing a great job. I would really like to see those types of efforts grow and expand, so it's not left to just one particular organization. And I also think to a large extent, we have to look at the immigrant population that is attracted to Maine. We've got some very talented new Americans that are coming into the state, and how do we better integrate them into our workforces and into this state to make them feel included and to provide those same good quality jobs that everybody is seeking.
Thank you, Nikki. Doug, I think I saw you start to speak. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, we generally hire that we have an exceptional university system that we can hire a lot from. But we've also, we have 1,100 employees, probably only about 200 of them here in the state of Maine. But we do work all over the country from here. And we've always thought we would keep this office small and grow other places. A lot of the folks that work for us come here to live in Maine because they want to be in Maine. And I've said this in past sessions. This is about our brand and our image as a state. And we can continue to tout all of the less attractive aspects about the state, an aging population, high taxes, no broadband, all those sorts of things, right? Or we can fix those and make this a destination. And as Speaker Fektow said earlier, we're, I think, the number 3rd state in terms of inbound residents. This is an opportunity to really take advantage of that. Let's not play small ball. Let's think big about how do we continue to pitch what this state is all about. That will then also encourage businesses to come here who would hire those people. So I think it's within our grasp. We got to stick to the plan though, and stick to the message.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Ryan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would love to. Being in the hospitality business and having, being able to talk from people from all over the country all summer long, we saw a huge influx of young professionals coming to Maine to spend the summer. People from Boston, New York City, they felt safe here. And the answer to that, really, to keep that trend moving, is a lot of conversation today about broadband, and that was the thing they needed the most. My nephew and his girlfriend recently, moved back home from Boston. They both could work remotely, and so we saw a lot of folks coming back home, from a small apartment somewhere in the city to, unfortunately, maybe their parents' house until they could find other accommodations. But, the young professionals that came here, I think of one couple that dined with me. She worked for HBO and he worked for a tech company. And they got out of New York City and they lived in Maine for the summer. And that is they could go to work every day remotely in the afternoon, get on their bikes, be out on Carriage Pass, be on the trails in Acadia. And that really appealed to the young people, to be able to have the best of both worlds, to be able to have, a kind of a high-tech job or a job that, they had gone to school for and trained for. And then secondly, a piece of that, and I think Doug hit on it really, really well, and that is, what is the message that we have to our young people about staying in Maine? I asked quite a number of people on this board over a past year or so to help me with some podcasts for students. And the simple question I asked them, you have the wherewithal, the means, and the ability to live and work anywhere in the country. Why in Maine? So we've compiled those up, and for students that are working with me in the Bridge Academy and early college, we'll get to listen to those and say, you're not settling for less if you stay and live and work in Maine. So we've got, I think, a multi-pronged approach. That is what's safe and exciting about living in Maine. And then 2, why do so many people come here, build homes, especially in my area in the Acadia region? We see a lot of folks come. And certainly in the past few months, real estate's gone sight unseen and bought and paid for. So I think Doug hit the nail on the head. Instead of talking about what our deficits are, we've got a lot to brag about.
I agree. It's really amazing. We talked about this yesterday, I guess, that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're in the middle of a recession, and property values and inventory on homes for sale are it's absolutely incredible process. So that speaks to many of the things that we're selling as a state. To pivot here a little bit, while this particular these meetings are more state-oriented, I think it'd be good for us to stop and pause and think a little bit about federal. Dave, could you just start a conversation for us on any federal laws or legislation that are impacting us, are impacting your business or impacting Maine?
Sure, and I'm going to start on immigration because it is a big deal. It should be no surprise that I'm a supporter of immigration. My father's been it was a big deal for him back in the 70s, and it remains a big part of our workforce today. With a population of 300 people, we have people from 30 different countries around the world, which is just stunning for the city of Portland. So I'm going to, back out at the federal level. We've got programs like the Dreamers, which, is very good. And I've talked to so many people in the state that have come in through the DACA or Dreamers Act. And as some people may know, that was reintroduced yesterday in DC. So we hope that gets some support and moves forward. Another one at the federal level is the farm workers. That's been passed and is being reintroduced right now, hopefully in the Senate. And those are big questions. Over the past few years, we've seen our immigration policy get really tightened down. And for those of us in either manufacturing or that have relied on that, it's been a big deal. I am, however, going to comment on four activities, ways that our legislature can help in the state. We have four bills that are up right now. LD 149 is part of a barriers for those people that are either out of state or out of the country to get credentialing improved, professional and credentials, being able to get those quicker. That's a big deal when you're coming from out of the country. You'd be surprised the number of doctors that we have or have had at Barber Foods coming and taking a first level position where they could be a tech pretty easily. We're wasting resources that could be put to work at a higher level. LR 1095, that one needs funding for adult education and on-site worker training. We did this at Barber Foods, and it was immensely successful to bring in and integrate people from way away to come and work in a food production plant. LR 1773 is funding for adult ed hubs to help people get re-skilled. These things are really important to help new Mainers improve their ability and ramp up and help improve that whole talent portion of our strategic plan. And the last one I want to mention is LR 1580, which is a tax credit for employers that help with on-site housing or housing in their communities to help fill their ranks and roles for people looking to get a job. So yes, I focused on immigration in that piece of it, but they are very important factors for many businesses in the state.
Good, thanks, Dave. The rest of you, do you have some thoughts on any federal policy that's impacting your business?
There's one that's looming, and there's a lot of conversation on the Restaurant Workers of Maine, Facebook page, and that is the potential elimination of the tip credit at the national level. There's about 4,000 members of this service organization and grassroots that fought to get that reinstated in Maine a few years ago. And they're now taking it to the national level, and having spoke with our national delegation in an industry that's been decimated by the pandemic. To have that tip credit lost for servers would just be devastating for them. So, and then I'd support what Dave was just saying. When we get post-pandemic and then we are trying to run on all cylinders, and we don't have the staffing and the help to be able to run at 100% capacity to be able to take care of our customers in the hospitality industry, we're just not going to be able to come back. We've got a couple of really long years ahead of us to be able to dig ourselves out of the hole that we're in. So many of my colleagues here in the Bar Harbor region are deep into their lines of credit in hopes that they'll be able to dig their way out. And the only way they can do that is if we have enough staff and help to be able to meet the demand. So, and we hope that there's demand this summer. All indications in my area, campgrounds are seeing good reservations, the hotels are seeing good reservations, Airbnbs are booked, and so maybe there's just a little bit of light, at the end of this tunnel. But if we can't find the staffing and the help to be able to meet that demand, that's the most frustrating thing ever, to see that, you have to close down some shifts because you don't have enough help. But I would say, so far what Davis spoke about and the elimination of the tip credit are weighing heavily on people.
That's good. Thank you, Brian. Such a challenge that, and I think it's going to happen, that as you're sharing, the economy is going to come back, and it's going to come back fast and hard, very likely. And how do we position ourselves to have the people to do those jobs? Doug, you touched earlier on infrastructure. Could you talk a little bit about policy that you would like to see to improve our infrastructure, both tangible infrastructure and modern infrastructure? What's your viewpoint?
Well, I do think the old adage, build it and they will come, applies here, right? I think you're probably going to hear a similar theme from me around brand, but we've talked a lot about two things, right? Really connectivity and quality of place or what we're known for. And I think connectivity is both broadband as well as roads and bridges. Again, we already have report cards that can give us good scores as to what the return on the investments we're making is doing in terms of the quality of roads. But when people drive into the state of Maine and they take off on different roads and so on, their image of who we are, whether they want to stay here, the quality of the place that we all know this is defined by the stuff that they see, the roads that they drive across, the things that they see. And then connectivity matters. But I also think you have to have a business mind around that and have an ROI. It'd be great to have broadband in every corner of the state, but you also have to have a plan that looks at what's the return on that investment. If we make, if we create policy that helps fund some of that, how do we make sure that it then in turn is attracting people, keeping people, aiding in education, which is critically important, as well as getting businesses to come here. So I think the infrastructure plan likes to talk about the things we see. And I would tell you that it's sometimes the things you don't see that is just as important. And that's really the water, utility infrastructure, the stuff buried below the ground. We are fortunate to have quality streams and lakes and so on in this state, but it's only going to stay that way if we continue to look at water and wastewater treatment as part of our critical infrastructure. I'm pleased that the state and the people of the state has generally supported the various referendums or bonds to fund those sorts of things, but that's also a critical part of what our infrastructure is. But I think it's got to be seen as more than just paving roads. I know when we went through the recession and there was a lot of money thrown into shovel-ready projects, one of the things in the industry was stated was we're 2 inches closer to God, but we really haven't fixed many of the infrastructure problems. And so I think you got to look at really the depth of infrastructure. And then the last thing I'll say is this also will put people to work. If we commit to roads and bridges and utility lines and water pipes and things such as that, there's plenty of jobs buried in there that we could not only improve infrastructure, but also improve the ability to attract people and keep people here for good paying jobs.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on infrastructure challenges or accomplishments that we've had? Okay. Hey, Mark, so we've got about 10 minutes left on our panel here. Do we have any questions from the audience that we'd like to bring in?
Yes, sir. We've got one question. It came through actually during the last session. Our legislative leaders were asked if there was anything positive that has come out through the COVID-19 pandemic.
Nick, you want to start?
Sure. As difficult as it's been managing through this pandemic, I think that what stands out to me is something that is positive that has come out of this is I think Mainers have really pulled together. And I mentioned earlier about, Maine is very community minded. And I think that everybody really stepped up. I think small businesses work together, employees work together, and the community, we all stepped up and really worked together and shown that we're tough Mainers and we know how to persevere through this. And I'm also very appreciative to the different benefits that were made available to small businesses and to Mainers through the various legislative initiatives that came out of there. I know we definitely benefited from some PPP proceeds and we're grateful for that. But I am never never miss it recognizing the real heart of Maine's community and how we've pulled together.
Any thoughts on that from your perspective?
I could tell you that when we were getting ready to open up last summer at the Union River Lobster Pot, I took this opportunity, and I said this to many of my colleagues: this is a great opportunity to make changes in your business that your customers would never let you make. Try some things that you might not ever find the time to do or the ability to do. So we had to turn our business upside down, and so we're lucky we have some space. So we put picnic tables outside. We converted to online ordering, curbside delivery. So we had free license to try whatever we thought would be able to help us survive this. And we landed on some things, frankly, that we're going to keep when we can go back. And then in the education sector, I think what you'll see is that while remote learning has been difficult for many students, there are many students who have thrived in this online environment. And there's conversation amongst education leaders that I talk with saying, how do we keep the best of both worlds? How do we meet the needs of those students who have really thrived online and remote learning, as well as those students who need to be sitting back in the classroom? So now everybody's familiar. A rural Maine may not have all the resources as urban cities do when it comes to education. So now there's the groundwork and the ability maybe to be able to use both methodologies to the benefit of the student. So there'll be some things that lessons have learned and things that they'll keep. So there is some silver linings in there, but they frankly came at a huge cost.
It's true.
Chris, I would.
I'm gonna
add
agree with that. It's stunning how fast different groups. I mean, you have a couple hundred people working out on the production floor, and how our main support businesses got together to figure out how to separate people, both in break rooms and on the production line. I'm on the University of New England Board of Trustees, and it was stunning how fast that group moved to protect the students, protect the teachers, make sure that students were learning with as much in-person as possible. So it is stunning how people reacted quickly within our state to keep things moving along.
Thank you, Dave. And Doug, comment?
Yeah, let me also. I also serve on the board of Northern Light Health Mercy Hospital here in Portland. It was remarkable to see how they pivoted, and quite frankly, how safe they've all stayed. It's just really an example, as Nikki was saying, about resilience. I think it was Churchill who said, "Never waste a good crisis." And that was clearly the case this past year. A lot of what we do has been disrupted. I think the hospital systems in the state probably haven't gotten the attention that they need. They have all had to keep everybody employed, spend more money on PPE and all the things necessary that was not provided by the federal government, and have about 20% of the expected revenue. Try running a business that way. They are in need of some help there, but they've shown that regardless of that, they can operate under different conditions. And I said this earlier. You've seen everybody in this country see places like Maine as a place to go during this. If there's not a silver lining in this COVID situation, it's for us to recognize that and make the investments we need to make that keeps those people here. As Brian was talking about, lots of people come and you have to ask them, well, why do you leave? Why not stay and bring your life here?
I agree. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and I liked Luann's lightning round. And so if you were sitting in front of the governor or in front of the legislators right now, and you had one thing in 15 seconds or so that you could leave them with, what would it be? Brian, you want to start?
Yeah, it would just be a stability, for my industry. It's really about being able to plan for the upcoming season and know that, we're going to be able to operate and under what circumstances.
Thank you. Nikki?
I would ask them to remember is they're operating is, they're not in a vacuum, that they have a lot of great resources available. As many people mentioned, look at it from a different person's lens, take advantage of the resources and the knowledge that's available to them when legislating.
Great point. Dave?
I'm going to echo the stability thing. It's, it's really important to make sure that business has a stable working environment to work within, and to have ever-changing tax policies or ever-changing whatever policies. It's just not great for the business community.
Great point. And Doug, you want to add our last couple seconds for this session?
Sure. I'd say two things. Be bold and don't be myopic. I think right now we have got to be bold, stick to the plan, and think about the future, and not blow in the wind with every issue that comes up. And then don't be myopic. We are desperately trying to thrive in this state, but we're competing with other states. The things that we do here, if people don't like them, they've got options, right? We are not on an island. And so don't think about policies and laws that are only going to make a difference within the walls of the state. People will go elsewhere if we don't figure it out.
Great point. As I think about the state of Maine and being a lifetime resident here, that this is a special place. And while we've talked about a lot of challenges that are here and in front of us, we also have so many great things going for us. And as I think about one thing that I would leave with is, I'd like our state to be a little cockier, a little more confident of what we have to offer, that we are truly a special place, and there's a lot of reasons for people to come visit and also to come stay. So on behalf of the Maine State Chamber, to the four of you, thank you for taking some time, sharing your input, sharing your thoughts, and helping us guide the state. So Dave and Nikki and Doug and Brian, thank you. And I'll pass it back to Dana, I think.
Whether your team is your family, your business, or your employees, staying connected is crucial. You can depend on the Cross Insurance family.
Very good.
To provide the best insurance solutions for you. We've got your team protected. Visit crossagency.com today.
Well, that concludes the end of our session today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, for participating. I want to thank all of our panelists. I'd like to thank the governor for her time. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors who, without their help, this wouldn't be possible. I'd also like to thank Headlight for all their work, bringing this virtual summit to all of you and to all of us. Well done. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Dana Connors and his advocacy staff and all the staff behind the scenes that made this run flawlessly, kept all of us on a schedule, which is not an easy task. But one last thought that I have is that these summits always leave me encouraged. When I see a body of stakeholders that come forth and put out their visions, speak their truths, and we collaborate on behalf of the state of Maine, I always leave encouraged, and I don't see there's any obstacle that we can't overcome together. Dana.
Amen. Cliff, I think you said it so well. When we realized that we weren't going to be at Sunday River, which we've always cherished because it was in person, that the anxiety around being able to replicate that, boy, when I think of the panels that we have and the messages that have been delivered, I am just so encouraged, so inspired, and it's been so promising. I'm reminded of what my mother used to remind me of when I was 23, 24 and a city manager. Yes, I was young once, Cliff, so I just want to make that point. But when I'd be fretting about things, she'd say, remember, Dana, that yesterday was history. You learn from it. Tomorrow is a mystery. You got to plan for it. But today is a gift. I'm not sure I'd use the word gift today, but I would say an opportunity. And I say that because, You know, when you think of what's been said, there's a clear message of where we're going and how we're going to get there. It's the strategic plan, economic recovery, measures of growth. Every single panelist referenced to that. And it sets us in a place we no longer have to worry about those words. If you don't know where you're going, any pathway will do. And when you listen to all of them today, it's impossible not to be encouraged because every single one of them talked about togetherness, collaborative thinking. It's everything you said. And I think you and I could not be more pleased with this Leadership Summit. And I thank you for all your work here and for setting the message, which was the same as yours. Together we can. And that's it. And we thank you all for another, what we believe to be a Leadership Summit success. See you next year.
Next year.